At approximately 2 a.m. Central Standard Time on a Saturday, Mike was awakened by pounding on the door of his trailer. "Come on, Mike, open up," came the voice from outside of the trailer. Mike blinked a couple of times, sat upright on the couch he was sleeping on, and glanced at his watch. 02:08, military time. 2:08 in the a.m. for the civilian types. Mike was never in the military, unless you count the first 9 years of his life when he was technically a Navy brat. He adopted the method of timekeeping because he found it much more precise for his hobbies. "Go away," Mike yelled. He recognized the voice behind the door. Nothing good ever came when that person that belonged to that voice darkened his doorstep. "Don't come back." "Well, we can't do that. We need in now," the voice yelled back. "Wait, we?" Mike thought. He brought company. Lucifer's ballsack. "Hold on," he said. Mike stood up on one leg, pivoted, and sat back down into the wheelchair that was parked next to his couch. He swiveled the chair and wheeled over the brief distance between the couch and the front door of the trailer, deftly weaving his way around the piles of books he had stacked all over the place. Parking himself in front of the door, he checked to make sure his rifle was within reach, and finally reached up and turned the doorknob, letting the door open to the full extent of the security chain that was still in place. An eyeball showed through the crack of the door. "What is it this time?" Mike barked. Being awakened this early, he wasn't trying to hide his general annoyance with his acquaintance. "Come on, let us in. We got something and we need to know how much we can sell it for." "Oh, goody," Mike thought. "Were you followed?" A pause with indistinguishable muttering. Then, I don't think so. Even if we were, we hid the car in the trees and walked the rest of the way here." Mike sat down a bit deeper in his wheelchair. His anger was simmering. "Fine," he said. He was already awake, and it would be hours before he calmed down enough to get back to sleep. "Give me a second." Scrolling. He closed the door and simultaneously disengaged the security chain and grabbed the rifle at the same time. Backing up about a couple of feet, thumb on the safety, he aimed the rifle to where his visitor's head would actually be. "Okay, come in." The owner of the voice behind the door came bursting inside, extruding a strong, nervous energy and a noticeable twitchiness that, for those who have only seen him in passing, would attribute to some kind of disorder, possibly ADHD. Mike, however, knew better. Dressed only in a stained t-shirt and a pair of equally stained jeans, the underweight character with stringy hair was sweating despite it being 30 degrees outside. Clutched to his chest in a protective death grip was a backpack. Walking behind him was a larger man dressed in black slacks and wearing a matching jacket and gloves, both made of leather. There couldn't have been a better physical representation of opposites found anywhere else. "Hello, Sean," Mike said, keeping his rifle trained on him. He looked at the other man. "Hello, person I've never met before." "Oh, hey, this guy's Yuri," Sean said, the permanent nervous smile twitching a bit, exposing the complete lack of teeth. Mike could almost hear the clicking inside Sean's head as he tried to compose a feasible lie. I am his cousin," said the man, the thick Russian accent making Mike's eyebrows arch in a slight surprise. "From back east. Him visiting." "Right, gotcha," said Mike. He turned his attention back to Sean and gestured with his rifle. "What do you have for me, Sean?" "Hey, would you put that gun away? It's making me nervous." "No." Mike ignored the urge to remind him that this wasn't a gun he had pointed at his head. No need to be pedantic. Instead, he said, "What are you doing here, besides interrupting my sleep pattern?" "Hey, man, you got to chill out, okay? We need your expertise, okay?" Mike scowled. He lifted the rifle to his shoulder, aiming clearly at Sean's head. Though he was certain that Sean's cousin was packing himself, he didn't make any moves to go for it, his gloved hands folded calmly in front of him. He looked more amused than anything. "Have you forgotten you fucking method?" "I haven't. I told you not to show your scabbed over face to me again, you piece of shit." Do you remember what I told you what I'd do whenever I saw you again? He quickly pulled the lever action on the rifle, chambering a bullet. He made a bit of a show, flicking off the safety. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain to me why I shouldn't make good on my promise. Sean panicked. What the fuck, man? Chill out. 20 seconds, Mike answered back. Yuri finally spoke up. We have recently come into possession of very old artifact. I am told you are expert at determining authenticity. Mike looked up at Yuri, then back at Sean. His scowl deepened. What kind of old artifact? Very old, Yuri repeated. He turned to look at Sean, who hadn't taken his eyes off of the rifle trained at his head. Let's show the men, please. Yeah, I'll do that. Sean unzipped the top of the backpack, and instead of reaching inside as Mike was expecting him to, he lifted the open pack towards Yuri. Yuri himself reached in with both of his gloved hands and, after rifling inside for a few seconds, lifted out a wooden box. Making sure he still had Sean covered with the rifle, Mike looked at the item that Yuri held. A wooden box, approximately 8 inches long by 12 inches wide and 6 inches high. It looked like mahogany, deeply stained by age. There were carvings all over the box. Okay, bring it closer, Mike said to Yuri. He laid the rifle down at his lap, making sure it was in a position where he could use it at a second's notice. He glanced back at Sean. Don't move, he said. Sean responded by lifting both his hands up over his head, dropping the backpack in the process, the other mystery contents that were left inside issuing a muffled clinking noise. Yuri stopped about a foot away from Mike, holding the box out close for him to take a better look at the markings. Leaning in closer, Mike couldn't believe what he saw on the carved box. On the side of the box, several very detailed renderings of creatures, humanoid but bearing likenesses of that black lagoon monster from that movie he remembered watching with his father when he was very, very young. Several of them swimming suspended on the sides of the box, looking upwards and lifting their hands in supplication, their large, bulging eyes imitating the look of sheer ecstasy. Carved underneath these creatures was a cityscape, an ancient one the likes Mike had only seen depicted in some of the books that lay scattered in his trailer home. Oblong shapes, spires and towers rising to the sky, all in angles not possible to maintain in three-dimensional reality. What really caught his attention was the carving on the top of the box, a large throne, depicted to look like it was hewn out of ancient onyx, surrounded by several different symbols, runes of some kind that looked like they predated even the most ancient cuneiform discovered. Scattered around the box, it was in no discernible pattern, where what looked like the five-pointed pentagram only warped slightly to the right with an eye in the center. Drawing his gaze to the very center of the lid was seated on the throne himself, made Mike's heart stop for just a millisecond. To others, this would have been mistaken as a stylized Baphomet, only instead of the head of a goat and a body of a man, it had the unmistakable shape of the kraken of ancient lore, its face surrounded by several tentacles, each acting independently from each other, its body covered with scales, and leathery bat-like wings extended fully behind it. The thing looked down upon its humanoid worshippers from the deep, a look of utter indifference in its empty eyes. Mike recognized it immediately. Cthulhu. Well, either that or one of the many lesser-known relatives of the great old one that looked a hell of a lot like him. The chances were slim, though, because as far as he and other scholars who were far more smarter than he was, that he knew, Cthulhu was the only one that dwelled deep within the ancient oceans of our planet. I wouldn't do that, Yuri suddenly said. This seemed to snap Mike out of a trance he was unaware he was in. What? Mike looked down. Sometime during his examination of the box, he started to reach toward it, intending to touch it, caressing it with his fingers. He blinked a couple of times, then looked up to make sure Sean was still out of the way. The meth head still had his hands up, but looked a little more amused than what made Mike comfortable. He put his hands back on the rifle without breaking eye contact with Sean to make a point. You need to wear gloves, Yuri continued. We learned this the hard way. Mike looked back at Yuri. He still held out the box for Mike to see. Where did you get that thing? He chanced another glance at the box. Nebraska is not exactly close to one of the seas it is rumored to originate from. Excuse me here. This time Sean spoke up, grinning. Would you believe we swiped it from Midland University in town? Mike looked back at Sean, cocking an eyebrow and gripping the rifle tighter. Midland? Really? What were they doing with it? Is on loan from Miskatonic University back east, Yuri said. Okay. Mike eyed them both. And what do you guys want with it? Well, it's a box, right? Sean started. That means there's got to be something inside it. Something old, really old. He was starting to get that mix of agitation and excitement that never ended well. I figured we would figure out how to open that thing. Yuri placed a hand on Sean's shoulder, silencing him immediately. He frowned at Sean, saying, Is no concern what we will do with Bucks. He was possibly saying that for both of them. Turning back to Mike, he continued, We need you to determine authenticity. You come highly recommended by cousin. Gotcha. Mike wheeled his chair backwards a bit more and pointed to the kitchen table in the adjacent section of the trailer. Go ahead and place it on the table there, next to the magnifier. Just put some of the books aside. Yuri did so, while Mike kept his eye on Sean, rifle grasped. Sean still kept his hands up. Okay, Yuri said, walking back to the door. We leave here. You look at it. We will leave and come back later. Wait, what? Sean objected. We're just going to leave that thing here with him? Yuri looked back at Sean, his expressionless face broken by his forehead furrowing a bit. This made Sean quickly shut up again and started back sweating. Yuri turned back to Mike. I trust you understand the importance of this. Mike had to admit, he was beginning to warm up to Yuri. He had that scumbag Sean scared shitless. Sure thing, boss. Good. Placing his hand back on Sean's shoulder, he turned and reached for the doorknob. We go now. Come back around. He looked like he was trying to figure out something in his head. 1,800 hours. Is that correct? How you do time? Mike couldn't help but grin a bit, despite being slightly uneasy about how he knew his preferred method of timekeeping without having said anything. Yep, that's how I do time. I appreciate that. Sean looked confused. What's that? Yuri looked back at Sean and chuckled a bit. The big hen is on the 12 and the little hen is on the 6 in the PM. Well, why didn't you just say that in the first place? This made Yuri laugh even more as they walked back out into the dark night.